I'm going to read to you a book that I've been wanting to read for quite a while, and I saw this in a bookstore that I was in the other day, and it looks like the perfect one because it's got very nice pictures. It's got a lot of words, but it's got a lot of pictures too. And this is called The Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Grahame. I'll take the nice cover off of it and put it away so I don't damage it. The Wind in the Willows, Kenneth Grahame, illustrated by Marcela Calderon. This nice picture in the beginning. I really like these pictures. The riverbank. The mole had been working very hard all the morning, spring cleaning his little home, first with brooms, then with dusters, then on ladders and steps and chairs, with a brush and a pail of whitewash, till he had dust in his throat and eyes and splashes of whitewash all over his black fur, and an aching back and weary arms. Spring was moving in the air above and in the earth below and around him, penetrating even his dark and lowly little house with its spirit of divine discontent and longing. It was a small wonder, then, that he suddenly flung down his brush on the floor and said, "Oh, bother," and "Oh, blow," and also "Hang spring cleaning," and bolted out of the house without even waiting to put on his coat. Something up above was calling him imperiously, and he made for the steep little tunnel. He scraped and scratched and scrabbled and scrooged, and then he scrooged again and scrabbled and scratched and scraped, working busily with his little paws and muttering to himself, up we go, till at last, pop, his snout came out into the sunlight, and he found himself rolling in the warm grass of a great meadow. "This is fine," he said to himself. "This is better than whitewashing." The sunshine struck hot on his fur, soft breezes caressed his heated brow, and the carol of happy birds fell on his hearing almost like a shout. Jumping off all his 4 legs at once, in the joy of living and the delight of spring without its cleaning, he pursued his way across the meadow till he reached the hedge on the further side. He thought his happiness was complete when, as he meandered aimlessly along, suddenly he stood by the edge of a full-fed river. Never in his life had he seen a river before. This sleek, sinuous, full-bodied animal, chasing and chuckling, gripping things with a gurgle and leaving them with a laugh, to fling itself on fresh playmates that shook themselves free and were caught and held again. All was a shake and a shiver, glints and gleams and sparkles, rustle and swirl, chatter and bubble. The mole was bewitched, entranced, fascinated. As he sat on the grass and looked across the river, a dark hole in the bank opposite, just above the water's edge, caught his eye, and dreamily he fell to considering what a nice snug dwelling place it would make for an animal with few wants, above flood level and remote from noise and dust. As he gazed, something bright and small seemed to twinkle down in the heart of it, vanished, then twinkled once more like a tiny star. But it could hardly be a star in such an unlikely situation, and it was too glittering and small for a glowworm. Then, as he looked, it winked at him, and so declared itself to be an eye, and a small face began gradually to grow up round it, like a frame round a picture. A brown little face with whiskers, a grave, round face with the same twinkle in its eye that had first attracted his notice. small neat ears, and thick silky hair. It was a water rat. Then the two animals stood and regarded each other cautiously. "Hello, Mole," said the water rat. "Hello, Rat," said the Mole. "Would you like to come over?" inquired the Rat. "It's all very well to talk," said the Mole rather pettishly. He being new to a river and riverside life and its ways. The Rat said nothing, but stooped and unfastened a rope and hauled on it, then lightly stepped into a little boat which the Mole had not observed. It was painted blue outside and white within, and was just the size for two animals, and the Mole's whole heart went out to it at once, even though he did not yet fully understand its uses. The Rat sculled smartly across and made fast. Then he held up his forepaw as the Mole stepped gingerly down. "Lean on that," he said. "Now then, step lively." And the Mole, to his surprise and rapture, found himself actually seated in the stern of a real boat. "This has been a wonderful day," he said, as the Rat shoved off and took to the sculls again. "Do you know I've never been in a boat before in all my life?" "What?" cried the Rat, open-mouthed. "Never been in a... You never? Well, What have you been doing then?" "Is it so nice as all that?" asked the Mole shyly, though he was quite prepared to believe it as he leaned back in his seat and surveyed the cushions, the oars, the rowlocks, and all the fascinating fittings, and felt the boat sway lightly under him. "Nice? It's the only thing," said the water rat, solemnly as he leant forward for his stroke. "Believe me, my young friend, there is absolutely nothing, nothing half so much worth doing as simply messing about in boats. Simply messing," he went on dreamily, "messing about in boats. Messing." "Look ahead, Rat!" cried the Mole suddenly. It was too late. The boat struck the bank full tilt. The dreamer, the joyous oarsman, lay on his back at the bottom of this boat, his heels in the air. About in boats, or with boats. The Rat went on composedly, picking himself up with a pleasant laugh. "In or out of them, it doesn't matter. Nothing seems really to matter. That's the charm of it, whether you get away or whether you don't, whether you arrive at your destination or whether you reach somewhere else, or whether you never get anywhere at all. You are always busy, and you never do anything in particular, and when you've done it, there's always something else to do, and you can do it if you like, but if you'd much better not. Look here, if you've really nothing else on hand this morning, suppose we row down the river together and have a long day of it." The Mole waggled his toes from sheer happiness, spread his chest with a sigh of full contentment, and leaned back blissfully into the soft cushions. "What a day I am having," he said. "Let us start at once." "Hold on a minute then," said the Rat. He looped the painter through a ring in his landing stage, climbed up into his hole above, and after a short interval reappeared, staggering under a fat wicker luncheon basket. "Shove that under your feet," he observed to the Mole as he passed it down into the boat. Then he untied the painter and took to the sculls again. "What's inside it?" asked the Mole curiously. "There's cold chicken inside it," replied the Rat briefly. "Cold tongue, cold ham, cold beef, pickled herring, This is a big long word, and I'm having trouble with it. Let me try again. I'll show you the word in a minute. Cold tongue, cold ham, cold beef, pickled gherkin salad, French rolls, crescent sandwich, potted meat, ginger beer, lemonade, soda water. Can you see that? It might be a little blurry, but it's that word right there that got me all tongue-tied. Oh, stop, cried the mole. This is too much. Do you really think so? Inquired the rat seriously. It's only what I always take on these little excursions, and the other animals are always telling me that I'm a mean beast and cut it very fine. The mole never heard a word he was saying, absorbed in the new life he was entering upon, intoxicated with the sparkle, the ripple, the scents, and the sounds, and the sunlight. He trailed a paw in the water and dreamed long, waking dreams. The water rat, like the good little fellow he was, sculled steadily on and forbore to disturb him. I like your clothes, old chap, he said after some half an hour or so had passed. I'm going to get a black velvet smoking suit myself some day, as soon as I can afford it. I beg your pardon, said the mole, pulling himself together with an effort. You must think me very rude, but all this is so new to me. So this is a river. The river, corrected the rat. And you really live by the river? What a jolly life! By it and with it and on it and in it, said the rat. It's brother and sister to me, and aunts and company, and food and drink and washing. It's my world, and I don't want any other. What it hasn't got is not worth having, and what it doesn't know is not worth knowing. Looks like they're having a grand time, doesn't it? What lies over there? Asked the mole, waving a paw towards a background of woodland that darkly framed the water meadows on one side of the river. That? Oh, that's just the wild woods, said the rat shortly. We don't tend to go there very much, we river bankers. Aren't they very nice in there? Said the mole a trifle nervously. Well, replied the rat, let me see. The squirrels are all right, and the rabbits, some of them, but rabbits are a mixed lot. And then there's Badger, of course. He lives right in the heart of it, and wouldn't live anywhere else either if you paid him to do it. Dear old Badger. Nobody interferes with him. They'd better not, he added significantly. Why, who should want to interfere with him? Asked the mole. Well, of course, there are others, explained the rat in a hesitating sort of way. Weasels and stoats and foxes and so on. They're all right in a way. I'm very good friends with them, past the time of day when we meet and all that, but they break out sometimes, there's no denying it, and then, well, you can't really trust them, and that's a fact. The rat brought the boat alongside the bank, made her fast, helped the still awkward mole safely ashore, and swung out the luncheon basket. The mole begged as a favor to be allowed to unpack it all by himself, and the rat was very pleased to indulge him, and to sprawl at full length on the grass and rest, while his excited friend shook out the tablecloth and spread it, took out all the mysterious packets one by one and arranged them in their contents in due order, still gasping, oh my, at each fresh revelation. When all was ready, the rat said, now, pitch in, old fellow, and the mole was indeed very glad to obey, for he had started his spring cleaning at a very early hour that morning, as people will do, and had not paused for a bite or sup, and he had been through a very great deal since that distant time which now seemed so many days ago. What are you looking at? Said the rat presently, when the edge of their hunger was somewhat dulled, and the mole's eyes were able to wander away from the tablecloth a little. I'm looking, said the mole, at a streak of bubbles that I see traveling along the surface of the water. That is the thing that strikes me as funny. Bubbles? Oh, said the rat, and chirruped cheerfully in an inviting sort of way. A broad, glistening muzzle showed itself above the edge of the bank, and the otter hauled himself out and shook the water from his coat. "Greedy beggars," he observed. "Why didn't you invite me, Ratty?" "This was an impromptu affair," explained the rat. "By the way, meet my friend, Mr. Mole." "Proud, I'm sure," said the otter, and the two animals were friends forthwith. "Such a rumpus everywhere," continued the otter. "All the world seems to be out on the river today. I came up this backwater to try and get a moment's peace, and then stumble upon you fellows. At least, I beg pardon, I don't exactly mean that, you know." There was a rustle behind them, proceeding from a hedge where last year's leaves still clung thick, and a strippy head with high shoulders behind it peered forth on them. "Come on, old badger," shouted the rat. The badger trotted forward a pace or two, then grunted, "Company," and turned his back and disappeared from view. "That's just the sort of fellow he is," observed the disappointed rat. "Simply hates society. Now we shan't see any more of him today. Well, tell us, who's out on the river?" "Well, Toad's out, for one," replied the otter in his brand new boat. "New clothes, new everything." The two animals looked at each other and burst out laughing. "Once it was nothing but sailing," said the rat. "Then he grew tired of that and took to punting instead. Nothing would please him but to punt all day and every day, and a nice mess he made of it. Last year it was houseboating, and we all had to go and stay with him in his houseboat and pretend we liked it. He was going to spend the rest of his life in a houseboat. It's all the same. Whatever he takes up, he gets tired of it and starts on something fresh." "Such a good fellow, too," remarked the otter reflectively, "but no stability, especially in a boat." From where they sat, they could get a glimpse of the main stream across the island that separated them. And just then a boat flashed into view. The rower, a short, stout figure, splashing badly and rolling a good deal, but working his hardest. The rat stood up and hailed him, but Toad, for it was he, shook his head and settled sternly to his work. "He'll be out of the boat in a minute if he rolls like that," said the rat, sitting down again. "Of course he will," chuckled the otter. "Did I ever tell you that good story about Toad and the lock keeper? It happened this way. Toad, an errant mayfly, swerved unsteadily athwart the current. A swirl of water and a clop, and the mayfly was visible no more. Neither was the otter." The mole looked down. The otter's voice was still in his ears, but the turf on which he had sprawled was clearly vacant. Not an otter to be seen as far as the distant horizon. But again there was a streak of bubbles on the surface of the river. The rat hummed a tune, and the mole recollected that animal etiquette forbade any sort of comment on the sudden disappearance of one's friends at any moment, for any reason or no reason whatever. "Well, well," said the rat, "I suppose we ought to be moving. I wonder which of us had better pack the luncheon basket." He did not speak as if he was frightfully eager for the treat. "Oh, please, let me," said the mole. So, of course, the rat let him. The afternoon sun was getting low as the rat sculled gently homewards in a dreamy mood, murmuring poetry things over to himself, and not paying much attention to Mole. The mole was very full of lunch and self-satisfaction and pride, and already felt quite at home in a boat, or so he thought, and was getting a bit restless besides, and presently he said, "Ratty, please, I want to row now." The rat shook his head with a smile. "Not yet, my young friend. Wait till you've had a few lessons. It's not as easy as it looks." The mole was quiet for a minute or two, but he began to feel more and more jealous of Rat, sculling so strongly and so easily along, and his pride began to whisper that he could do it every bit as well. He jumped up and seized the sculls so suddenly that the rat, who was gazing out over the water and saying more poetry things to himself, was taken surprise and fell backwards off his seat with his legs in the air for the second time, while the triumphant mole took his place and grabbed the sculls with entire confidence. "Stop it at once, you silly person," cried the rat from the bottom of the boat. "You can't possibly do it. You'll have us over." The mole flung his sculls back with a flourish and made a great dig at the water. He missed the surface altogether. His legs flew up above his head, and he found himself lying on the top of the prostrate rat. Greatly alarmed, he made a grab at the side of the boat, and the next moment, sploosh! Over went the boat, and he found himself struggling in the river. Then a firm paw gripped him by the back of his neck. It was the rat, and he was evidently laughing. The mole could feel him laughing right down his arm and through his paw, and so into his, the mole's, neck. The rat got hold of a skull and shoved it under the mole's arm. Then he did the same by the other side of him, and swimming behind, propelled the helpless animal to the shore, hauled him out, and set him down on the bank, a squashy, plumpy lump of misery. When the rat had rubbed him down a bit and wrung some of the wet out of him, he said, "Now then, old fellow, trot up and down the towing path as hard as you can till you're warm and dry again, while I dive for the luncheon basket." When all was ready for a start once more, the mole, limp and dejected, took his seat in the stern of the boat. And as they set off, he said in a low voice, broken with emotion, "Ratty, my generous friend, I am very sorry indeed for my foolish and ungrateful conduct. My heart quite fails me when I think how I might have lost that beautiful luncheon basket. Indeed, I have been a complete blunderer, and I know it. Will you overlook it this once and forgive me and let things go on as before?" Oh my gosh, would you look at them down in the water, how he's rescuing his friend. Quite a mess they got into. "Oh, that's all right, bless you," responded the rat cheerily. "What's a little wet to a water rat? I'm more in the water than out of it most these days. Don't you think any more about it. And look here, I really think you had better come and stop with me for a little time. It's very plain and rough, you know, not like Toad's house at all, but you haven't seen that yet. Still, I can make you comfortable. And I'll teach you how to row and to swim, and you'll soon be as handy on the water as any of us." This day was only the first of many similar ones for the mole, each of them longer and full of interest as the ripening summer moved onward. He learned to swim and to row and entered into the joy of running water, and with his ear to the reed stems he caught, at intervals, something of what the wind went whispering so constantly among them. This is a good story, and I'm hooked. That's the end of the first chapter, so we will stop there for today. I hope you're enjoying it.